Madame Vyce.
I'd like to thank you for allowing me to speak today in support of Bill S-252. The Canadian Union of Public Employees, or CUPE, is Canada's largest union with over 680,000 members. CUPE represents Canadian Blood Services workers in British Columbia, Alberta, and New Brunswick. They connect our country's volunteer blood donors to Canadian Blood Services and help to ensure the country's blood supply is safe. CUPE recommends that the Senate support Bill S-252 because it will promote national self-sufficiency and ensure that Canadian blood remains a public resource for use by Canadian patients. Crucially, Bill 252 will protect our publicly accountable and safe blood system that Canadians have come to trust. Canadian Blood Services collects enough plasma to meet 17% of the country's need for immunoglobulin, or Ig. The remaining plasma that's needed is sourced from the United States. Health Canada granted licenses to Canadian Plasma Resources under the false pretense that private, for-profit plasma clinics would boost our plasma self-sufficiency. However, the clinics do nothing to help us achieve this goal because the plasma they collect is sold to buyers in foreign markets. Introducing payment for plasma has also made it more difficult for Canadian Blood Services to recruit voluntary donors in Saskatoon and Moncton, especially among the 17 to 24 age group, which consists of the most desirable donors. The cases of Hungary, Germany, and the United States show that when the civic-minded culture of voluntary, unpaid blood and plasma donation is lost, you can't get it back. Canadian Blood Services informed Health Canada that its plasma expansion plan does not include purchasing the plasma collected by Canadian Plasma Resources or other commercial sources because it's, quote, not reasonable or sustainable mechanism to ensure a safe supply of Ig for Canadian patients, end quote. Without Bill S-252, Canadian Blood Services will lose control over the collection of plasma, as well as control over the supply, safety, and cost of plasma to Canadian Plasma Resources and other private companies. Canadian Blood Services has built a safe blood system over the past 20 years that Canadians trust. Allowing that system to be sold and eroded by private shareholder interests won't safeguard our blood system or the public interest. Pharmaceutical companies are not in the plasma industry for altruistic reasons or to save lives. They're in it for the money. It's possible to increase plasma self-sufficiency through voluntary unpaid donations. Between 2013 and 2018, Quebec increased Quebec's plasma self-sufficiency from 14.5% to 21.5%. The rate of self-sufficiency in France is 54%. In Denmark, it's 81%. And in Italy, it ranges between 70 and 96% for all Ig-based products. In all cases, plasma is collected publicly and solely from voluntary unpaid donors. Their success is attributed to three simple key measures. First, each blood authority educates the public about plasma donation. Secondly, they find that when people are asked, they are willing to donate. And thirdly, they're focused on providing high-quality service to build and retain the donor base. CUPE is confident that Canadian Blood Services can similarly increase Canada's plasma self-sufficiency within our existing public, voluntary, and unpaid donation system, and our members are ready to support their efforts. Countries across Europe are making self-sufficiency through voluntary, unpaid donations a common strategic objective. Allowing private for-profit clinics into our blood system takes Canada in the opposite direction. Finally, Canada's dependence on plasma sourced from the United States poses a safety risk to security of supply and is not viable in the long term. There's a significant risk that the plasma supply could be disrupted or cut off due to production failures, regulatory actions taken by the United States, such as an America First policy, or contamination from an emerging pathogen. If this happens, Canadian patients won't be able to access needed treatments. The threat posed by new pathogens that could enter the blood supply is real. A new infectious pathogen that causes chronic wasting disease, or CWD, has entered the deer family in Alberta, Saskatchewan, Quebec, the Midwestern United States, countries in Europe, and South Korea. There's no cure for CWD, and it's fatal to infected animals. Current research on macaque monkeys and mice shows the pathogen that causes CWD could cross the species barrier and impact humans through the consumption of contaminated agricultural products or meat that's been contaminated that hunters have caught by hunters. There's no test to detect and no means to inactivate or destroy the pathogen if it enters the supply of blood and plasma, much like the case of HIV in the late 1970s and early 1980s. To protect the safety of supply, we must be prepared for the emerging threat CWD poses. Legislating a national ban on payment for plasma is therefore necessary to avoid incentivizing high-risk donation that may irrevocably contaminate the plasma supply when we lack any safeguards against CWD. If we focus on increasing our national self-sufficiency through voluntary, unpaid donations, we'll reduce the risk of a supply shortage because our system won't rely on plasma sourced from the United States and will ensure the blood supply is safe by encouraging the collection of plasma from the safest donors, those who are voluntary and unpaid. Thank you very much.